Want to know what the movers and shakers of New Hampshire's performing arts are thinking? Welcome to New Hampshire Unscripted with your host, Ray Dudley.
But it was, I had good leads, decent leads, and they paid attention to me when I gave them direction, which is always a plus.
Yeah, isn't it?
And they did, a decent job for the most part.
Yeah.
We sort of ran out of rehearsal time towards the end because also some of them had conflicts because...
but didn't they know?
Well, we sort of begged the guys to be there. The two fathers, Mr. Webb and Doc Gibbs, we both begged to get them to come and do it. And so Mr. Webb came in really late, and so he wasn't off book. He was probably the last one that was really off book. And Doc Gibbs was Mark Schlossberg. And he was very good, but he had a bunch of other conflicts, so he missed a bunch of rehearsals towards the last 2 weeks or so. Before the last 2 weeks, he wasn't there.
Did it show? Could you tell? And when you watched the production?
I mean, with all these other small parts all screwed up all the time, no. So
that was
it is what it is.
That was for the Manchester Community Theatre, which is not the same. That's not Majestic. They're not related to Majestic.
No, this is Alan Kaplan's group.
Okay.
They do 2 or 3 shows a year. They do a Christmas show, and then they do a musical in the fall.
Do they usually have a good following?
They've been around a while. I have not gone to the musicals. They often do a straight play in the spring, and I've directed 2 other times for them. I directed the Sisters Rosenzweig for them 2 years ago. And the first time I directed for them, they asked me what did I want to do, and I picked 3 Days of Rain by, can't think of who wrote that. A popular Broadway play, but not very well known. And I got Mark Morrison and Craig Champa and Shauna Champa to be in it. And so I thought I had a real good cast. And Alan got all excited because I wanted to make it rain, and so he made it rain on the window, outside the window. He was all excited about it. Alan's kind of about the tech.
Yeah, got you.
And so that was my 3rd time directing for them. And I had those problems before too, like I said, but not quite as bad as this time.
Yeah. So what are you off to next? What's your next project?
I am writing my play 6 Nights in the Black Belt as a screenplay.
6 Nights what?
6 Nights in the Black Belt. It's about Jonathan Daniels, who was a civil rights activist in the 60s. He marched with Martin Luther King and 10,000 other people from Selma to Montgomery. He actually did not make it all the way to Montgomery. He ended up going back to Selma in the middle of it, but he stayed in Alabama, and after the march, which was in March, he stayed most of the summer. He was back and forth from Boston. He was from Keene, but he was studying at the Eastern Theological Seminary in Cambridge to become an Episcopal priest. And he was back and forth to Selma all summer, and on August 23rd, I think, he was in a protest at this place called Haneyville, Alabama, and they arrested all the protesters and threw them in jail for 6 nights. That's why I call it 6 nights. And on the 7th day, they were released, and he got shot. And this guy was waiting for him, basically, to shoot him.
No kidding.
Yeah. He's on the Civil Rights Martyrs Wheel in the Civil Rights Museum that's outside.
I did not know there was such a thing.
Yeah. He's from Keene, and he went to Virginia Military Institute for college. And so he's kind of and everyone knows who he is in Keene because if you grew up in Keene, you went to Jonathan Daniels Elementary School.
Oh.
So a lot of people know, and I originally did this show in Keene, and Ray, I got to tell you, you do a show at the Hatbox or at Manchester or whatever, and you expect, for an original play, you expect 50 people, 25 people to show up, and you're thrilled to get that many. The place was packed. There were 600 people.
What?
Came to see this play.
What?
In Keene, yeah. 3 nights, every night, packed. Even the Sunday the Patriots were in the Super Bowl. It was the weekend it was the last playoff game before the Super Bowl. The Patriots are in, and 600 people show up to my play.
That's insane.
It's totally insane.
So, how do you think that? Is it just because they know of him, or is the Keene just got a better culture, arts culture?
I asked a couple of people, "Why are you here?"
Yeah,
and one answer I got was a little disheartening: is that my boss at Walmart told me I had to go.
Okay, so scratch that one.
Which is good for Walmart, I suppose, but sort of like bad for, whatever, why the guy was there. But,
that's remarkable.
Yeah. But that doesn't account for the other 599. And I don't remember which night this was, but one of the nights the fire department was there telling people that they had to come back the next day.
You were turning people away?
They were turning people away, yeah. It blew me away. Now, to be fair, one of the other reason I know that it was popular is that the city of Keene has a Jonathan Daniels something memorial that they do, and they sponsored the play, so they paid for the production. Not that it was expensive at all, right?
But you own the rights, so.
Well, I mean, they didn't pay me to direct it, and they didn't. No, I'm sorry, I didn't direct it. But they might have paid the director. But they didn't pay the actors. It's, typical community theater kind of thing. It's 7 characters, 7 actors. And but they do something every year for Jonathan. They had some Boston guy write a cantata for Jonathan, either the year before or the year after, yeah. And every year they do something for Jonathan in the city.
This is a fascinating background story. Yeah, this is like Fritz Witherby.
It is a little Fritz Witherby, yeah.
I mean, so you're talking 3 performances, that's 1,800 people to see something that nobody'd ever heard of.
Yeah.
Written by a local guy, which I don't want to denigrate that, but let's face it, without being a big-name author.
Absolutely, it is.
That's just... And it's a community theater play on top of that.
Yeah. This was in 2008, maybe, something like that. So it's been almost 10 years. And I've had it done other places, but never did I get audiences like I got there.
So you said you're going to redo it now? Are you rewriting it? Or
my friend Ernest Thompson,
yes.
The On Golden Pond guy, yes. Worth come. Ernest, there was 12 Years a Slave.
Yes.
And there was
Color Purple.
Precious.
Oh, yes.
Seen that movie?
Yes, yeah.
And there was Selma.
Yeah.
And Ernest thinks there's a market for the Jonathan Daniels story. And he has been really on my butt about writing a screenplay for it. So I wrote...
Seriously?
Yeah. So I wrote a screenplay. And
you did?
I did. And I sent it to him. And he wrote me a letter, like a 3-4 page letter. And he told me this story to open the letter. He said when he was writing Forrest Gump, he wrote a draft of Forrest Gump. And he said during the meeting with the producers, he said, I stuck up my middle finger like that, and I put it under the table because I was so angry about what they were saying to me. But I just sat there pleasantly listening to their notes. And the whole time I'm like, screw you guys. And
Was he hoping that you weren't going to fill out?
He said so. Take it with a grain of salt. And then he ripped it to shreds.
A little preface to what he's about to... Oh, he did?
Yeah, he ripped it to shreds. So I'm rewriting.
But you're a good friend. I mean, you're a good friend, but so you can...
I can take it.
You understand.
I have to say, Ernest has his naysayers, but I've gone to his writing workshop several times, and I've met lots and lots of people whose job it is to critique your writing and try to make you a better writer. And Ernest is 10 times better than anybody else I've ever met. And I've met some other Pulitzer winners who've critiqued my writing at the Sewanee Writers Conference. I met now I can't think of her name, but people who have a lot of credentials. Ernest is way better than any of them. He's so insightful. So
he sends you this, the notes. You looked at them and you're like, I see that, I get that, yeah. Or you're like, really,
oh no,
really?
I absolutely get it.
Yeah. And a screenplay is different than a play.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
mean, so because
absolutely.
Yeah. And so, were you trying to squeeze more in? What were the notes pertaining to, basically? Were they just like cut this?
So Ernest is really big on something he calls theme. Okay, and theme is, you might describe it as, why should I go see this movie? What is it about this movie that makes me want to tell you to go see this movie, right? And that is theme. And that's something that isn't necessarily easy to put your finger on. It's typically deeply emotional kind of thing that you want
attachment
that you're putting into the fabric of your story, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I can just sit here and tell you a story, and you might
yawn
and blink your eyes and politely listen to it, but secretly thinking, when will he shut up? But if it's got a great theme, if it's got a great background to it, if it's got great fabric to it, you'll be listening intently, and you'll want to know what happens next, right? And it doesn't, it goes beyond things like.
So it's good storytelling.
Yeah.
Basically.
Well, no, it's more. It's different than that.
Okay.
It's the why. About why are you telling the story?
Right.
What is the message you're trying to get across? And he didn't think the message was
as strong
good.
as it should have been.
No, he didn't think it was the right one.
Oh.
He didn't think it was the right one. So I have to tell you that writing a story about a living person, or a person that did live, that was a real guy, right? And making it compelling that way, and choosing that theme, and figuring out, because you can't talk to him, and sort of trying to cut the baby in half, right? You have to try to stay as close, or at least I feel you want to stay as close as you can to the reality of what actually happened, and then, but also, the dramatic part of it is storytelling, right? And what you choose to tell about what actually happened, because you have 2 hours, right, to tell the story, and what you're going to highlight of, this was from March until August. That's 100,000 hours or whatever. You have to pick the 2 that are important.
Yeah.
And it's really way more difficult than if I was just making the whole thing up myself.
This is interesting, because that you have in your head an idea of what story you're trying to put out there, or what story should be told, you think.
Yeah.
You're going to hand that off to a director who's going to go film hundreds of hours with what he's hoping is your vision, but he has his own vision.
Sure.
After he grabs hold of that screenplay.
That much of it, I think, is collaborative as well, as it is in theater. Yeah. The difference, obviously, between theater is, like you said earlier, that it's more visual, it's outdoors, it's multiple sets and multiple locations, and But once you can film it, and once it's right, or once the way you want it, you're done. You don't have to reproduce that every week, for months at a time.
Yeah.
So there's some advantage in film that you don't have in theater. But lots of times you find the theme, or you find that storytelling in the editing room, and you say, this scene works and this doesn't, and maybe you even reshoot something and come back to it and do it again. So it's you have some flexibility in terms of the director finding things, because he can come back to you as a writer and say, I'm not sure what's going on here, and these scenes don't seem to work, or they work really well. Should we take it in a different direction? Whatever.
So screenplay writing, is that
screenplay,
okay.
Screenwriting.
It's an art in itself, then.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, you never think of that, right? You see, when you see the credits roll and you see who wrote the screenplay, right, you just pass it over, most of us, and don't even think about what went into that.
No.
I would never have thought that it was on that level. I'm just kind of thinking, you're taking a story, a book or a play, and you're just going to convert it to a film.
Yeah.
But it's not.
No, it's not like that at all. I suppose it depends on what play you're telling. If you were going to go shoot To Kill a Mockingbird, in that case, you're sort of going from the film to the stage.
Are we talking the Broadway version that's allowed?
Yes, no.
It gets back to a different story.
Yeah, which one? But, and you've already spent a lot of time on that in your podcast, so. But the...
well, you can always put your 2 cents in. Don't worry about me. Michael Curtis had no problem,
Yeah.
so.
Well, I mean, I think I have such reverence for... the playwright Sorkin. Yeah. So it's hard for me to be completely objective about that, because he's such a great writer, but and a very good screenwriter too. But I thought that was very sad on the producer's part to unravel all these productions that were about to go on and run.
Yeah.
And certainly they're taking advantage of the fact that it's running on Broadway, and most people would not know that it was a different play that they were going to watch, that it was a different production and different script. So I get it, why they feel like you're coattailing them a little bit, but at the same time, it's totally unfair.
Yeah.
It
was a mess.
Yeah, it was a mess.
That's
so I'm glad it was resolved. Unfortunately, some people probably lost a lot of money, production money, putting those things together.
Yeah.
But
so what are you going to do with 6 days? Are you
6 nights?
6 nights. I'm sorry.
So Ernest hates that title, 6 Nights in He hates it.
Why? Well, I kind of thought it was cool.
Well, you just said 6 days.
Yeah, it's okay. Well, that's just, I'm old. I get the...
No,
did I drool on myself at the same time? It's what I do.
You're not the first who's done that. And I always struggle with titles. Titles are so hard. The Warmth of the Cold that we just did.
Yeah.
My mom, that was her favorite title of mine. She thought that was a great title.
I thought it was a cool title.
But I've blown all the other ones ever since then. I find it really hard to come up with a good title. So I retitled...
But the play is about 6 nights he's in jail, right?
Yes.
Or the screenplay, whatever.
Well, one of the things that confuses people is 6 Nights in the Black Belt. The Black Belt is the name of the area in Alabama where they were. Oh. The Black Belt of Alabama.
Okay.
But no one knows that.
I didn't know it either.
I had to explain it to you. So I retitled the screenplay simply Nonviolence. It's just called Nonviolence. And in the theme, initially, in the screenplay that I wrote for Ernest that he ripped the crap out of, nonviolence would have been the theme. I would have said,
sure,
if you asked me, what's the theme? Nonviolence is this theme. So what's the opposite of nonviolence?
Violence.
So the journey that Jonathan Sanders was on was from violence to nonviolence, right? Now, he was an Episcopal minister. How does this make any sense? Well, he went to Virginia Military Institute. And this is where I, as the writer, sort of inserted my interpretation of events. Jonathan is at VMI and learning to be a soldier. He's a skinny kid when he gets there. His very, very good looking. What you might call a chick magnet. Girls really like this guy. He goes to VMI. He's top of his class. He's in the top, 5% or whatever of his class. When he graduates, he's a valedictorian. He is very well liked on campus, and it's hard to say what his athletic ability was, but he's in a military school, right? And so I tried to suggest that his journey from being a military soldier to a minister went from violence to nonviolence. And I thought it made it kind of an exciting movie because there's a few punches thrown. And, he dies in a very violent way.
Right.
And so I thought that transition was very, let's call it Jesus-like, right? Where he, on the seventh day, he's released from this jail, and he knows that this guy is going to kill him, and he allows him to kill him because he's sacrificing himself for the greater good. And I thought it was beautiful.
Mm-hmm. But there was someone who didn't.
And to be fair, I sent it to the Nantucket Film Festival and a couple other screenwriting contests where you can get feedback from people. And I got a nice long letter from the reviewer at the Nantucket Film Festival. She started out by saying, I normally only write a few paragraphs about a screenplay. Yours, I'm going to write a lot more because I really want to encourage you. But this is what's wrong with it. And, she gave me a B+ or something. But she wrote some very, very nice things. But she, again, like Ernest, thought the theme doesn't work with this. So I tossed the whole thing out, basically, and started over again. And I've tried to find a new theme. And it's taken me a long time.
So you don't think nonviolence is the theme?
Well, the nonviolence is one of the themes, but it's not the thing. So the other thing that's hard about this story with this particular character is, why did he do it? Why does someone with a relatively comfortable life that's already in progress in the 1960s, look up and watch Walter Cronkite tell them about riots in Selma, and hear a call from Martin Luther King asking all the Episcopal, all the ministers, all the clergy in the United States to come to Selma? Why does he go? And why does he stay? And what is it he wants? And what's driving him to put the rest of his life on hold at age 26? And then eventually get shot. And I will still contend that he knew this guy was serious about killing him. And that whole story between these two guys, the shooter and the shootee, the shooter, his wife was on the vestry of the church that the Episcopal Church in Selma. And one of the things that Jonathan had been doing was trying to integrate that church, which did not go over well.
Good luck down there at that time.
But what's very sort of fascinating about that is that the Episcopal Church's official stance on integration and whatnot, it was that they were for it. So they
were for integration.
Yeah. Wow. So there was this thing called the ESCRU. I forget what the acronym spells out. It's Episcopal something. And they were officially sort of in favor of integrating Episcopal churches throughout the United States. But obviously it's the South where this occurs the most in that era. And they were not in favor of it at all, right? But, they have a very restrained sort of attitude about it. And so it puts the minister of that church in a very awkward position because he's got these idealistic Northerners, Yankees, coming down and, agitating the situation. And they point out to him that the official church position on this is to integrate. So, yes, but here's his vestry, his board of directors, telling him no. And they're the boss. So he's in a very awkward position. So that's a very interesting, dramatic story. And the guy who eventually, the idea that integrating my church is a big enough offense to me that I'm going to shoot you with a shotgun is also a very dramatic, interesting story that, this guy felt this is an appropriate way to resolve their dispute.
Yeah, could have been a movie in itself, just his point of view.
It is a movie. Hopefully it will be a movie someday. But, I mean, just that story.
Yes.
But the whole reason about why is he there and what's driving him, right? And that's a, I've never done that.
Right.
You've never done that.
Nope.
Nobody I know has ever done that. They don't typically, you might go to a local thing and put your life on hold and spend the day protesting something you're actively interested in. You might even, drive to Washington, D.C. and protest in the street there, or go to a march or whatever, or go to the march from Selma to Montgomery, and that's a big event, but when it's done, you go home. He didn't go home. He stayed, and he went out into the community, and he documented what he found about the living conditions that people were in, and how they were denied health care and denied voting, the right to vote, and denied all kinds of other things. And he, took pictures and documented it and was trying to make a difference, and he didn't get very far. He was...
Yeah, what a violent time.
Yeah.
Violent time.
Yeah.
My God.
Right after, I included the killing of Viola Loazu, who was driving a demonstrator home, a black kid who was in the back seat, and these 4 or 5 guys, one of whom was an undercover FBI agent, follow these 2 down the street and drive them off the road and kill the woman. And because, the other sort of interesting thing about this from a dramatic and also a psychological point of view is that the Southerners weren't so angry with the black people as they were with the white people who were helping them.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
They don't like that.
I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah. So they kill this woman, but they don't kill the black kid that's in the back seat. And this made the national news. I mean, Viola Loazu is a fairly well-known civil rights name, and because she was killed, and this FBI agent let it happen because they want to blow his cover.
Oh,
and that's a whole other story.
Good grief! You got like 10 movies inside this thing.
There's lots of drama there, but and this is part of the problem, right? Because you've got 2 hours, you can't tell 10 stories. You got to tell one.
Yeah.
And so finding, why he's there and what keeps him there and what his life is like and what he's trying to accomplish. And to me, initially the violence of the first thing and the transition from violence to nonviolence, I thought that was also kind of speaks to me personally, and I'm sure lots of other men who, when you're confronted by the bully, and that's what, the technique that a lot of this, these attitudes are driven by are bully-like, They try to intimidate you into doing it their way, and, my reaction is, how about a knuckle sandwich, right?
Right.
And, that's the opposite of what they found really works, is to not give in to that.
So you have to go through and redo this whole thing now? First you have to sit down then and rethink it through, right?
Well, I've already done it. And the other thing I've learned from writing, a couple of dozen stage plays is the best thing to do is to outline it. And then tell yourself the story. Read each sort of outline of a scene, and read it to yourself and tell, as if I was going to tell the story to Ray, what is it you're writing about? Here's, let's take half an hour and talk about this story and what it is you think is important about this story. As if I was going to try to summarize the movie for you. And as soon as you feel like that works, then you start writing scenes. And so that's what I'm doing now. And I'm trying to get it done.
You're in the outline phase?
Well, I'm in the scene writing
okay.
phase, yeah. But even so, I still have gone back and rewritten the opening, the first 10 or 20 pages, again, because it doesn't feel like it is setting things up the way I want them set up, what I'm going for now. And what that theme is now is more of the theme now is more of a story about love than violence.
Okay.
Than nonviolence. Because nonviolence is
Didn't see that coming.
Yeah, nonviolence is a thing, right? It's a behavior, maybe, but it's not emotional. But love is emotional.
Okay.
So if you are nonviolent because of love, that is a reason. That is something that you can sort of hang your hat on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's harder to stay there, to be that guy, than it is to, I mean, there's I've read a lot of source material from Jonathan. There's a book called Outside Agitator about Jonathan. There's another book, Jonathan Daniels, his letters and stories or something like that. Very thin book. Both of these are long out of print, but I managed to find them in a bookstore outside of Keene. And in those books, they tell you, Jonathan talking to his friends back home and to his the people at the ETS in Cambridge about why he's there and what he's going through. And one story in particular, he talks about facing down a police officer in a protest, like, right to his nose to nose. And he did that with, I would call it love. He did not, engage the guy in the anger that was what the whole thing was about, a line of screaming people.
Right.
And you're face to face with one guy. It would be very easy to just reach over and shove him.
Yeah.
Or reach out. And,
on either side, right?
Yeah. Or,
Yeah.
move his nose into his brain.
Sure, right.
And, Jonathan talks about the how hard it was to not do that. Right? The urge was so strong to just nail this guy. And he fought it, and he won that
Temporarily.
aspect of it. Yeah. So, he's a remarkable person and did a remarkable thing, and no one knows about it.
Yeah.
And outside of Keene, nobody's ever heard of the guy. And, I give credit to even finding out about him myself to Kevin Gardner, who did a show about him on New Hampshire Public Radio 12, 15 years ago. And
That started your journey back then?
Yeah. So I give credit to
It's
Kevin.
been in the works for a long time then.
Well, I wrote the play.
Yeah.
I wrote the play for 2008, and I just, had been modifying the play and sending it out and trying to find a theater to take it. And I get lots of interest in the play, but I don't get a lot of I haven't written the screenplay yet, so we'll see, if I can write a better second draft than I did first draft.
Well, apparently you can, because Ernest...
Well, he hasn't seen the second draft.
Yeah,
He'll email me every once in a while. In a couple of weeks, actually, during our town, he emailed me sort of like indirectly saying, where's my damn screenplay? Let's get this done. I want to get it out for this thing called the Nickel. It's a fellowship, scholarship contest that they run in Los Angeles every year, and the deadline is May 1st. So I want to get it out for May 1st. It's 10 days. Yeah.
Dude, you're going to put out a polished second edition, second rewriting in 10 days.
Yeah. I mean, I'm already working on it, so it's not like...
Well, I know, but, God, that's 10 days is not a lot of time.
No.
I mean, if you said to me, well, I'm 3/4 done.
Well,
I just got,
I would
all I got to
say...
do is put the tagline at the end. Then.
No. I'm pretty well along in it. Because you can really only write for if I write for 3 hours, I'm exhausted, right? Keeping your concentration up and sort of juggling all the balls you have to juggle. I cannot keep an entire play in my head, right? I realized that a long time ago, that I can't keep those whole 2 hours in my head at the same time. And I've tried.
So you need one of those walls with all the little stickies and string going through. And
I do sort of the equivalent of that. Excuse me. I do. I have the outline that I refer to all the time, and I'll go back and tweak the outline even as I'm writing it to try to keep it up to date, because that I can keep in my head. That whole number of scenes might be 30 scenes in 2 acts or 3 acts. Screenplays, if you didn't know, are typically thought of as a 3-act thing: beginning, middle, and end, right? And the middle and the end are the hard parts. But most people judge it by the first 15 pages or so. If you can't sort of capture people's attention in 15 pages, they'll say, well, this isn't going to get better. People will read that and say, oh, well, if the beginning stinks, then the rest of it's going to stink too. So you have to really capture people's attention in the first 10, 15 pages. And then, but the hard part of the writing is the last third.
Is that the first screenplay you've written?
No. My friend Donna O'Brien and I wrote a screenplay together. We got together at a coffee shop every day, almost every day, for almost a year, and wrote a screenplay. Donna actually submitted that to the Nickel herself, because it's not inexpensive to submit to the Nickel. It's about $60. And but we've never gotten more than a so-so reaction from people, different places that will sort of score your screenplay. I think it's the last 2/3 of that are really funny. It's a story about this girl who wants to be in the movies, and she ends up sort of inadvertently involved with a guy who's shooting pornography in Los Angeles. And she escapes that and makes her own movie, and going to a class in filmmaking, she gets all the other kids in class to make her screenplay. And I think it's a lot of fun, but it doesn't. It's not
resonating with
someone. It's not sparking interest in town, as they say.
Not yet.
Not yet. So we'll see. I want to, do as much as I can writing. It's the only thing I'm good at anymore. They wanted to put me on the TV show for Our Town, and I said I have a face for radio. I would rather just do the radio. And
what's the best play you've written, you think, in your opinion?
My favorite is the Sputnik. Sputnik, A Love Story.
Did you seen it?
Yeah.
No.
Michael Curtis directed it when NTG
at the Hat
did
Box,
it.
Right?
No, at NTG, Nashua Theater Guild. And, because it has a lead black character, it was incredibly hard to cast.
Oh, that's a shame.
But the guy that we got was pretty good, and he was Nigerian, which is what the role calls for. It's difficult, maybe, I don't know. But I have rewritten that since then several times and tweaked it a lot, and I got some interest from the theater in Chicago. Should pop out of my head.
Well, it was well liked in the original form.
Yeah.
I remember getting.
And I had a reading of it in New York City with a company called goodness, and I can't think of the name of them either.
It's tough getting old.
It is. It's horrible. Pop into my head. I had a reading at about the same time as that production went up, and the one of the artistic directors at that company that did the reading is a big fan of the play and has, tried to help me find people that produce it. It hasn't happened yet.
It's still in the works though for that?
The Goodman in Chicago. Yeah, so last year, I sent it to everybody. I must have sent it out to 30 or 40 places all around the country. I sent it to the Goodman. I talked to a couple of people about, I got a letter from the Goodman. The way you submit to the Goodman, and just parenthetically, there are only so many theaters in the country that are big like that, that will even read a script from an unknown person, right? Especially somebody not from Chicago in the case of the Goodman. Mm-hmm. There may be 5 or 6 in the whole country that are interested in that. Most people will rather discover a play through some other venue. For example, a friend of mine, Audrey Cefali, has a play that got picked up by the Signature Theater in Washington, D.C., but she got there because she did the Samuel French off Broadway something contest and won. And somebody went to the performance of that show, the winner's showcase performance, and that first version was only an hour long, by the way. And then Audrey expanded it to 90 minutes, and it's called The Gulf. It's a 2-actor play that takes place in a boat off the coast of Mobile, Alabama, and Audrey's from Alabama originally. And so that's how they discovered her work, and then she just won a big prize in California for her play called Alabaster, and that's being promoted by this thing called the New Play Network, where they do something what they call a rolling premiere, and each company in the New Play Network will pick a show that the sort of collaborative group has chosen to roll out, and they will roll it out across the country. So Audrey's stars rising because of the off Broadway thing. You need what I need my one. I need a Goodman, or I need one of those things to sort of get you noticed. Yeah. Because nobody wants to publish a play that nobody's ever heard of, or by an author that nobody's ever heard of. And you need something, tangible to point at and say, these guys at the Goodman produced it, so therefore it's good. Because there's a lot of good writing out in the world, right? It's not all terrible. Right. A lot of it's terrible, but not all of it. But how do you find it, And, God bless the hundreds of people that read for things like at the Goodman, looking for new material. Or
is that part of a festival? Do you get to submit it as a festival, or you can submit anytime all year round?
Yes, the Goodman will accept. So what you do for the Goodman is you have to send them a synopsis of the play, and then they'll ask you for the full script if they want to read it.
If the theme is good.
If the theme is good. Don't laugh.
See, I was listening.
But it's a real thing.
Yeah.
If you think their subscribers will want to see that play,
yeah.
And they'll ask to see the full script. And I talked to some of my people from Goddard, where I did my MFA. One of my faculty friends, Deborah Bevort, has never gotten a request for a script from the Goodman. She was super proud of me.
Oh, man.
Yeah, she says, how many times have I sent them something and they say, no, thank you. And
that'd be disheartening.
So, yeah, it's very disheartening.
So
I felt like I was this close, Ray. I was like, this is going to be my one. I'm going to finally get, and then they said, we liked it, but, it's not for us. Sorry.
Any other notes about what would make it for them?
No, that's great. It was a paragraph. It was 5 sentences. It was nothing. All that for 5 sentences, yeah. But, Evan at Strange Sun, that's the group in Manhattan. Evan, the artistic director, he says, somebody will find this. I sent it, the other place that I've sent
I'd like them to find it before you're 80.
Yeah. The other place I send things is to Davenport Theatrical in New York. A guy named Eric Webb will read your writing and give you a critique for several $100s. But
send it to me. I'll do it for several $100 too.
Sure you would. So would I.
Yeah.
But Eric's really insightful, and he was a big help on that particular script, and I will go back and reread what he said about it. I think one of the harder things is to find people who are good at critiquing, like Ernest, and I try not to bug Ernest too much. But, I've had people read it and say, and tell me things that weren't even in the script. And I just, that's the last time I talked to them about it. But they're sincere, but I feel like they're just trying to make something up because they don't really know what to say. So they'll say, well, I didn't like this relationship, and I'll say, it doesn't exist. That's why you didn't like it. I had one person do that who sincerely said she read it, and I said, I don't think you read it at all. So it's very hard to find people who are competent and
low life
half the time.
Jeez. So
it's worth it to pay, good people a few $100 to read it and really think about it. And it's a skill. It's a hard thing to do, to read and try to guess what somebody's going for, especially if it's not that good.
I don't even know if I have the guts to write and put it out there for critique. I just don't. I have such a fragile ego.
Yeah.
I hate auditions for the same reason, but I couldn't write and have somebody just tear it apart.
My Warmth of the Cold, let's talk about that since you were in that.
Okay.
I wrote that as my thesis play at Goddard. And we did a production of it with Yellow Taxi Productions way back in 2005 or 6? 5, I guess. And I got the cast to come to Goddard and do a reading of it for the school student body. After I was done with that semester, Deborah wrote Winrow Lockerbie. Have you ever heard of Winrow Lockerbie? Yeah. That's Deborah's most famous thing. Deborah said, I think you should get rid of this character. I don't think she adds to the story. And so I rewrote the play and took that character out because I agreed with her. And she wrote, so at the end of each of your semesters at Goddard, you get an evaluation of your work for that semester. And Deborah said she had never had a student in all her years of teaching playwriting, and she's also a librettist for musicals. Somebody so willing to change their, to write out a character. She didn't expect I would do it.
Really?
Yeah. She said, I suggested it, but never in a million years did I think you would actually do it. I said, well, I decided you were right. And she was very impressed or, happy with that I felt that way about it. And I trusted her intuition. And I think it's a better play. It's simpler. And it's more streamlined in some respects. And maybe you can tell me, how you felt about it.
Well, I loved it, actually. I mean, I thought it was a great play. It got great. The adjudication was interesting. I mean, they loved it, except for like one or two people.
Guy.
Yeah. And I'm really not even sure what they saw. I don't know if they went in with some preconceived ideas. I mean, that's part of the downfall of the adjudication process, right? It can be so subjective.
Yeah, it often depends on who you get.
Yeah, and what kind of a mood they're in. I mean, whether they slept the night before, it's just terrible that way. But, I mean, I thought it was a wonderful play. And I thought, what I really liked was, during the rehearsal process, since you were also the author and the director, you allowed the cast to have input into how you thought that they would feel at a certain moment. I mean, we did change one or two things based upon that.
Absolutely.
That I thought really propelled the story forward and made it a lot more interesting.
Yeah.
No, I thought it was a wonderful play. I really do. I'm surprised it didn't come away with, well, maybe it had been a different venue, or I don't know what would have made it different, but I just loved it.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I appreciated having you in the cast
and
with your experience and what you bring to a company. But I firmly believe that theater is a collaborative event.
Yeah, it's not always. I had this conversation with them. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe it was Matt Cahoon I was talking to.
Mm-hmm.
And we had this almost identical conversation where I said so many times in theater, the cast is just another piece.
On the chessboard.
Yeah. And they're moved. They're not asked for their input.
Right.
They're just, you go over here, go over here.
I've been in that role as
It's
an
a
actor
terrible way
where
to
you're
do
just
it.
told, shut up and do your job.
Yeah. Which is a terrible way to...
Yeah.
Especially in...
We're on the railroad.
Yeah. Not that community theater is okay. Community theater has its downfalls, but these people are volunteering their time. The least you could do...
But, more than that, and the problems I had with our town notwithstanding, because I totally agree with you. I certainly didn't say, I would never say as a director, even if I felt that way, just shut up and do your job, right? Because not only am I sort of discounting you as a volunteer, but I want your input as an actor, as an artistic person, right?
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that you're, as an actor, that you're investing as much time into this as you can, and that you're really thinking about whatever it is you feel. And, some people take that to the extreme, of course, and say, what kind of gum would I chew? Would I chew cinnamon flavored or peppermint or
on the left side of the bed when I woke up?
Yeah, right. I mean, now you're getting a little crazy, but I don't. That's great too. That I think that's wonderful if you want to get that invested in your performance, right? That you're gonna.
Yeah, I'd rather have that than the person who just didn't give a rip.
Yeah.
And shows up.
Exactly.
Gives me some cookie cutter thing that.
Absolutely. I thought we had a very great collaborative cast
I did too.
in our town. Or I'm sorry, in the Warmth of the Cold.
Yeah.
And so I really enjoyed.
I did too.
That part of it.
I loved listening. It was just fascinating to hear the mechanisms that are going through people's heads as they're trying to filter what you had put down on paper.
The one thing from the adjudication that you and I both read it, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that I find most interesting, you're familiar with any of things like circle mirror transformation?
No.
Annie Baker's work.
No.
Annie Baker won the Pulitzer a couple of years ago for a play that takes place in a movie theater. I forget the name of it now. And it'll pop into my head as we're talking, I'm sure. In the pace of this play, but also in her other plays, the pace is very deliberate. And one of the things that I firmly believe in as a writer is sort of what I'll call the unanswered question. So if I say to you, Ray, are you really in love with your wife? If you don't answer, there's a huge amount of tension right there, right?
Yes.
Right?
Right.
If you leave a nice long pause there and you say, well, do you want cream in your coffee or not? Right? And you laugh because you're relieving tension, because that's a very powerful thing. Right?
Yes.
So one of the ideas that I had for this particular production of Warmth of the Cold is to slow it down and to allow that tension to be there when it was necessary, when it was available, to exacerbate that tension a little bit. And I think one of the adjudicators read it and said something to the effect of that it was so powerful it bothered her to think about it even now.
Yeah.
Writing 2
Right.
weeks later or whatever.
Right.
And the other person said, this was so deliberately slow, I thought I was at a funeral. And I find both those things sort of fascinating. And one of them I find, the funeral aspect of it, I find it sort of mocking and disrespectful, but also puzzling that, like you said, maybe the guy or the woman just had a bad day and was in a bad mood and was going to take it out on this poor playwright.
It's fascinating. Gina, I hope you're listening. I had a friend who was an adjudicator, and he said he shows up to a play, there's another adjudicator there, and partway through the first half, he looks over and the guy's asleep.
Yeah.
This guy's going to write a review.
Yeah.
At some point.
And he's dozed off.
Yes. What? Come on, this is a head-scratching moment. Yeah. And to get back to your point, you really do have to wonder. But it's not a bad thing. I mean, because obviously they're seeing things from two very different filters here, which is pretty remarkable when you think of it. That you can have two opposing views of the same scene. Thing.
Yeah.
On the same night, because most of the adjudicators, if I remember, went pretty much on the same night. Yeah. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would have called it a funeral. And I certainly don't think it was. I agree with you. What a great term you used, that you should use tension when it's available. A great term, available.
Yeah.
Because I think that it does add so much more, and it's not used enough. And I don't know if it's not used more often because the cast doesn't get it
I think there was for a long time, not just, for me personally, but I think in the theatrical world, there's this sense that everything's got to be quick.
Yes.
Right? It's the sort of David Mamet school of
Do you have
acting.
something to say about David Mamet as well?
I love David Mamet up to a point. But that sort of snap dialogue that he was doing, everybody sort of mimicked that regardless of what they were performing, right?
Yeah.
We've got to all be bang, 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 the way Mamet was writing. Even if you weren't, deliberately doing it, you're sort of tacitly acknowledging the aspect of it. And now here comes Andy Baker doing the exact opposite, right?
Yeah.
But I sort of believe in the opposite a little bit more than not that Mamet's stuff didn't work. It worked obviously tremendously well.
Right.
But the word is available, right?
Yeah.
You've got to
I love that.
You got to know what you're doing. You know what you're not know what you're doing from the sense of theater, but know what you're doing in the sense of what's the material asking for. What are the lines demanding how are they demanding to be read? You understand that as an actor.
Yeah. Now, we had the same discussion during True.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of times when he stopped and you could see him thinking.
Yeah.
And those pauses, if they're done properly, the audience is invested and they can see that there's a mental process happening. Yeah. Done improperly, you just think they lost their line.
I think 10 years ago, the instinct to carry on would have been overwhelming.
Propelled it right through, yeah.
And a lot of people would sit there and either critique you, Ray, what are you stopping for? Let's go.
Yeah.
You're boring me. Let's go.
Matt slowed me down a lot of times.
Yeah.
Because I tend to bull.
But I think we've reached this sort of moment in the history or culture or whatever of theater is that we've gone to the Andy Baker side now.
Mm-hmm. It's the opposite
of Mamet. Mamet sort of hasn't written anything anyone cares about in the last 2 or 3 years, and Andy Baker's winning Pulitzer Prizes and influencing.
No, Mamet's out there pissing people off about discussions. Talk back.
Yes, that's right. No talk backs in your show.
Yeah, right.
I don't really get my head around that. I'm not sure what he's...
I have a hard time with it as well. Michael didn't have very many kind words for Mr. Mamet. And then it revolved around that. So that's another whole...
I gotta insert, though, David Mamet's book on playwriting, who's the title of which will pop into my head, hopefully. You remember I said earlier that the last 2/3 of the play or screenplay are the hardest parts to write. David Mamet, in his book, describes that last 2/3 and what it's like to write it. And he does it in a sort of poetic and metaphorical way. And he describes a movie called Bad Day at Black Rock or Last Day at Black Rock. Do you know this? It's
pretty sure I saw that.
Yeah, it's a 60s era movie with a couple of, iconic actors.
Yeah.
And he hates this movie. And he describes, so without going into a lot of detail, this sort of idea of structure in screenplays is that at this last 2/3 moment, you are, what David describes, this moment where the hero, for lack of a better word, reaches a decision, and as he describes it, we're headlong for the end, right? And that moment is the pivotal moment of the movie or of the play, where a choice is made, and now we go for that choice. We dive into it. He calls it the "I had a kitten" moment, and the reason he calls it that, and I don't remember if this is in Bad Day at Black Rock, but it's, the hero is thinking, when I was a kid, I had a kitten, and that kitten fell down a well, and I rescued that kitten. And that was what made me who I am today. And he's doing it, obviously, sort of tongue-in-cheek.
Sure.
But it's really, you can go through movies that you and I have both seen, and we can find the "I had a kitten" moment, and because it's a real thing. And he sort of makes fun of it, but at the same time he acknowledges this structure. And just playwriting structure, I think, is one of the hardest things to master. It certainly is for me. Some people may be better at different aspects of writing dialogue or story or theme, but structure for me has always been the hardest. And structure is the 3-act beginning, middle, and end idea, right? But sometimes in Hollywood they call it 5 acts, or maybe 3.5. There's a beginning, a middle, a second half of the middle, and then an end, right? And other people will describe it different ways. And it's really interesting and fascinating to me figuring out how that structure has been laid out in any particular movie. There's a really great Jennifer Lawrence movie called Winter's Bone, which, according to the formula for how to write a movie, is literally to the second of the structure in terms of time, when Act 1 ends, when Act 2 ends, and when the movie's over. It literally...
It's like a template.
They say Act 1 should end at 30 minutes. Act 1 in that movie, it's so obvious, anybody can tell, and you're watching on your little DVD player, 30 minutes, click, boom, you're in Act 2. And if I pointed it out to you, you'd say, well, damn, you're right. I mean, that's obvious. And then when you get to the end of Act 2, it's 90 minutes, or whatever the number is, 60 minutes, and it'll go 59, 60, boom, you're there. And you'd say, well, I never noticed that before. Winter's Bone is a...
I'm going to have to watch it.
Is a perfect template for structure in screenwriting. Excuse me, the way that they say it should be done. And what's fascinating to me about that, if you go back to one of my Eugene O'Neill plays that I did, Wilderness, that I was in as an actor. And this is back when our old friend Sue McIntyre was around, and she directed that play. And she had us sitting on the stage one day in rehearsal, and she said, describe something about how this play works and why is it organized the way it is. And I didn't give the Bad Day at Black Rock example, or the Winter's Bone, because that hadn't come out yet. I used Star Wars, which is also very obviously formulaic, but people don't care, and they don't even notice most of the time. And I said, Wilderness is the same structure. It's very clearly laid out this way, and people were blown away. They just never looked at it that way. So, as a writer studying playwriting and screenwriting, this is all I think about when I'm watching a movie. I will look at my watch. I will set if I have a countdown
it must be
timer on my
terrible to watch
phone.
TV or movies.
I'll often go to a movie and start the timer, and when I feel like, is this act one over, I'll look at my time and see, where we are, and it's always around 30 minutes.
That's amazing.
It's really...
on a microcosm, I can see where that, you mentioned that the last 2/3 are the most difficult.
Oh, yeah.
But you can see that, again, a micro way. If you ever watch an SNL skit,
Yeah.
they have terrible times ending them.
Yeah.
They can't get out of them.
Right.
They have the general idea, they
Right.
get into it, and then
They have a gag.
and
then
they
don't
can't
have
get
any way
out.
to resolve things.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a perfect example of on a small level.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's exactly right. It's the hardest thing sometimes to what Steven Spielberg says is the end is buried in the beginning. Or maybe Mamet said that. But Spielberg will say, in a lot of his movies anyway, he will demonstrate this. In Saving Private Ryan, for example, he'll have an image of whatever, the American flag, and at the end of the movie, he will return to that image. So the end is buried in the
tying
beginning.
it up.
Yeah, and that's the way you sort of resolve things. The other thing that sort of fascinates me...
Is that an American thing, a Western culture thing? Do they do that, or is it that the Europeans do it? Would you find that in an Italian film or a French film?
It's universal.
Oh, it is?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Everybody does it that way. Spielberg does it his particular way, but the end is buried in the beginning. And this is what makes something satisfying to watch, right? If you watch a play or a movie or even reading a story on the page, your sense of satisfaction comes from feeling like that the story that you were promised was told, right? And you might remember from your 5th grade essay writing contest, the advice is tell them what you're going to say it, tell them what you said. Have you ever heard that before?
Yeah.
That's more or less what we're doing, right? If you tell them what you're going to say and then you don't say it, people go, well, wait a minute, there's something missing. And you might not be able to even put your finger on it. What was it this is about?
Yeah.
Why did I come see this show? Right? I just saw Amelia the other night.
Yeah. Did you like it?
Wonderful.
I loved it.
Wonderful production. But I have some problems with the writing.
All right.
But you saw it.
Yes.
So what happens at the very beginning?
When she's in love with the guy, they were on the platform?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't know the context of the situation.
Correct. Right.
But at the end, we go back to that beginning.
Exactly. We're back to the beginning.
Right? So there's an example. The
Oh,
end
I
is
see.
buried in
Yeah,
the end is
yeah.
buried in the beginning.
And I
right?
loved it. You didn't like it?
Well,
Okay.
we'll
Okay.
talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
But the end is buried in the beginning, so it gives you resolution to that which was initially unresolved. You'd probably forgotten about it by then, but when you saw the picture of it, the way Brian had set it up,
Yep.
there it is, and it brings you back to that moment, and now you know the context and you know what's going on. The problem I have with the structure of the whole thing is that this is, first of all, from a writing point of view, this is a really hard story to tell, because what is the theme of that story? What was the theme of that play?
Love.
Love what? Why?
Well,
Love conquers all, is what I was going to say.
yeah, that fits. Because
Yeah.
she went looking for him. Yeah.
So, right.
All the
so,
obstacles she had to overcome.
Right. So as a character, she has two choices, right? She can go, well, my boyfriend, husband, the day after we got married, joined the Civil War. I haven't seen him since. Gee, that's a shame.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And the play is over at that point, right? So she can't make that choice. She has to pursue him. So I'm sitting there saying, well, I know where this is going to go, right? She has to pursue this guy. And there was a great line in sort of the middle of the thing where the slave is helping her. Mm-hmm. And he says, you should go home. What do you think your husband would want you to do?
Yes, I remember that.
And she says, go home. And he says, there you go. And she says, I think I should tell you that I normally do the opposite of what my husband says.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Yeah.
That's a very funny line.
Yeah.
And true, but also had to be that way because otherwise the show is over.
Right. If you went back.
So part of the problem with the script and in the writing and the structure of it is that there's no I had a kitten moment. If there was one, that was it, right? Where we're from that moment we're headlong to the end, right? But that's sort of muffled moment of determination that she had to go on, and it was too soon. It happened more about halfway through than 3/4 of the way through, right? Because you don't have the sort of story memory that you're carrying with you as a reader, as an audience member. Excuse me, the impetus, the excitement of that moment that's going to push me through to the end, that no matter what happens, I'm going to find my husband. And that you get sort of exhausted from the moment that she starts going looking for him. She has a relatively comfortable time in the beginning, and then the problems sort of mount.
Right.
And you get sort of exhausted with that, right? Because everything is always getting worse, and she doesn't seem any closer to her goal. And so, again, about 3/4 of the way through, when she tells the soldier, no, put me in Andersonville, I want to be in this prison, she had to do that, right? She couldn't ever go home. So her choices were sort of made, they were built in. So I got sort of exhausted, and I wanted there to be what you might call a switch or a reversal or something, a compelling choice that she had to make that was better than the slave guy saying, what would your husband tell you to do? I wanted one of those many brilliant characters that Wayne brought to the show.
Yeah.
Tremendous. To be someone like from home, like maybe she meets the guy's best friend that also went. And now he says, Amelia, I've always loved you too. You know that. Maybe I was a bit ham-handed about it, but I know that Elijah isn't going to make it. I think he's probably dead already. I saw him die, whatever. Something that was compelling, that she really had to struggle with that decision, because she wasn't going to turn around for the slave.
Right.
But if she had met his best friend, or someone that, had a credible connection to him, and he said, I'm tired, we're out, we can get away, let's go home. And then she chose to continue. That, I think, would have been structurally the I had a kitten moment.
Yeah, that's interesting.
If that happened just before the end, because you get exhausted with this, right?
Yeah, it was obstacle after obstacle
after obstacle, and never any sort of relief.
Well, I found that interesting, though, you bring up. Every time she would get to someplace, they had already moved on, like another day's journey.
Yeah.
And so she had to go a day's journey when
Right.
she gets there. Oh, no, they already went over to the other side.
They're just on the other side of the hill.
Yeah. And so she kept that. You would think, and it does wear you out.
So this is also kind of fascinating to me from a writer's point of view, is what makes this play compelling is that it's one character and then the guy doing 67 other different characters from a theatrical performance spectacle point of view. They were tremendously good at that. The acting was tremendous. And then there's the set, which was simple and straightforward, and the lighting and the sound effects were all really great and compelling. From my point of view as the writer watching this, that overcame the flaws in the writing.
Right.
And I think that a lot of theaters, if you're reading the story and you're thinking, do I want to do this play, right? Most people, Brian, I'm sure included, read that and said, oh, well, this is a really great story. Oh, and it happens to be told in an interesting way. No. Actors want great acting challenges, right?
Yeah.
They saw this as a performance that would be very compelling. And the story is good enough that it stands up to it. But if that same play was done and, 18 different actors played the other roles that Wayne played by himself.
Or a lesser actor tried to do it.
Well, but even without that, just on the page, if you're reading it, it's not as interesting. Mm-hmm. What makes that so compelling is the way it was done. I think.
Yeah.
And I think the writing is not, particularly fabulous. It's not bad, but it's structurally. Mm-hmm. Who was I talking to the other day? And somebody said that I hate everything I read, and that I hate everybody else's original productions that I've seen. Probably Andrew Kennard told me that, and but I don't really. The thing that bothers me the most is structure, for the reasons we've been talking about. Because, like I said, there's some really great dialogue in Amelia. There's some really great moments. There's lots of great things. It's the big thing that mostly nobody but me cares about that bothered me about it. Yeah. Right? Other people would go, well, who cares about?
Well, because the acting, you're right, it overpowered the weakness of
that structure. But when I point it out to you, you kind of go, oh, yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah. But at the time, didn't matter. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So I find that as a writer, I find that interesting to sort of motivate me and how I want to pursue.
Yeah, that'll always in the back of your head as you continue to.
Oh, well, maybe I should write this with, one character in 27 different roles, and then they'll do it, as opposed to something else. Because the other trend in society now, in production anyway, is to do just have two actors because it's cheap.
Yeah.
I remember seeing a show with somebody once, and I said, the ideal production would be a sold out house with no set and no lights and no actors. And the theater just takes home a lot of money, and everybody walks out saying how good it was.
That would be a dream.
Yeah, because they don't want to actually have to pay anyone or do any production work because it costs them too much money. So they do the least they possibly can at the highest value they can.
So the ROI on it is just perfect.
ROI is better, yeah. And I mean, I certainly, as a producer of the Christmas Carol tour and other stuff that I've written myself and whatever, I certainly appreciate the whole idea of how many seats did we sell, because it's not unimportant, but at the same time, you look at all these two-person plays out there. When I was at Goddard, one of my other favorite advisors, they're not professors there, they're advisors, was Leslie Lee, who was a black playwright who was finished runner-up for the Tony Awards to Tom Stoppard. In Leslie's play was called First Breeze of Summer, and Tom Stoppard beat him with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead or something.
Really?
Yeah. And so I wrote what they call an annotation on the Stoppard play and gave it to Leslie. He called me up, which they never do. He says, first of all, how dare you? And he was all tongue-in-cheek, of course, but he told me this whole story about how he lost the Tony to Tom Stoppard and how much he hated that son of a bitch. And Leslie died a few years ago, and I was in the hospital with him. He's one of my best friends. He was just such a sweetheart. And one of the things that he taught me about the two-hander is that there's no knock at the door. And he said, when you walk in the theater and you look at the cast member, the list of the cast, and there's only two, there's no knock at the door. And he said,
what an interesting perspective.
I like the knock at the door. And Leslie and I had long talks about the knock at the door. And in Sputnik, there's a knock at the door. And that's mainly driven by my discussions with Leslie. The father shows up in the middle of the play to knock at the door and say, what the hell's going on here?
See, these are things you don't think about, right? That's brilliant. I mean, it's a simple thing.
It's a very simple thing.
But it changes everything when you really think about it.
Yeah.
It had such a level to the dynamic.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
God, those nuggets. Man. And so he had that nugget. How many people could use that nugget?
Oh, sure.
Right? And know it.
Imagine if there was a knock at the door in Amelia.
Yeah, right.
How would it change it?
Right.
Right. I mean, he sort of does it by having all these multiple different characters played by the same guy, but still, there's no real knock at the door.
Right. It's kind of forced when you have to do it with two people.
Yeah.
Well, that's a shame. That's a very interesting perspective.
So I loved that show, and I thought it was really well done, but that's my thought on the writing of it is not so much.
Yeah. You looking forward to anything coming up? What's on your calendar I don't see much. Well, there's a lot of. Now we're getting into the professional season coming up.
Yeah. I happen to sit next to Joel Mercier at Amelia on Saturday.
Oh, no
so
kidding.
he told me what the summer season they're doing is.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, a lot of those guys, producers, have to struggle with, doing Annie or something they know will sell versus something.
Did you see that thread on Facebook?
No.
Oh, Michael Curtis he laid the wood on the Palace Theater.
For their season.
Yeah.
It's all.
Ooh,
it's
baby.
all
yeah.
iconic.
He called them out and said, why are you doing this? Did you know there's more than 5 plays out there?
I certainly, as a writer, I want them to do something new once in a while. And, I understand the reason, though. You have salaries to pay.
Well, that was Joel's perspective. So Michael went through that whole thing come on,
You need to have somebody with money who's willing to underwrite things in case it doesn't sell. So, 6 Nights of the Black Belt, when my good friend Billy Butler was working at Seacoast Rep, and Craig, what's Craig's last name? Craig was the artistic director.
Schwartz?
No. Pop in my head. Craig was the artistic director. Billy brought him my play, 6 Nights, and he agreed to produce it at Seacoast Rep. I had won the main, it's called there's a playwriting contest at in what's the big city in Maine? Bangor? No. A regional theater that's in Maine. Not Last Frontier. That's a
beats me. I never get out of my kidding.
Yeah. So, anyway, I had won this contest. They were going to do a reading of 6 Nights at this play at this theater in Maine, and then I got Craig production of 6 Nights at Seacoast Rep. So I wrote to the guys in Maine, said I got a production, and one of the rules is if you get a production, we're not going to do the reading because we'll give the opportunity to someone else, right? And then October comes along, they do the announcement, they include me in their season, and then somewhere along the line, Craig says, I can't afford to do this anymore because I know I'm going to lose money on it, and I have to cancel it. And they did Rounding Third instead because they knew they could sell it, or they thought they could sell it. And I was just, I don't know, not devastated, just sort of, this is what the world we're in now, where you've got to do rounding third instead of something that nobody's heard of by someone they've never heard of because right? Because money.
Right.
And
it's a terrible discussion to have.
Yeah.
And they're all fighting it. I talked with Leslie Pankhurst up at the Winnie. Same discussion.
Yeah. I've begged Neil and Leslie. Neil directed Warmth of the Cold for me way back at, but he did it at.
When they were in the little shopping mall there?
No. He did it for North Conway.
M&D?
M&D.
Oh.
He did Warmth of the Cold at M&D. And, hats off to those guys for producing it.
Yeah.
And Neil directed it. And I thought, we can't do better than this. But, Neil has said, well, one year we'll do a season of New Hampshire playwrights. And we'll get you into that. But it hasn't happened.
Well, it's kind of the reason
because he's got bills to pay, too.
Yeah, right. So it's kind of the reason that the Players' Ring and the Hat Box exist. So that some of this stuff can get done.
Yeah.
I mean,
who else does original work except for...
No, I know.
Well, NTG and the Hat Box.
And it's a gamble. Did you make any... No, you didn't make any money off it, right? Yeah.
No.
That's why.
I'm sure
it's a terrible decision to have to make. Yeah. Do something that could be really good, but no one's ever heard of it.
Yeah.
Or do something everyone's heard of. It's going to make a lot of money, but the rest of us get all angry about it.
One of the advantages of amateur groups is they don't have, overhead. And if they can afford to take a loss of a couple of grand, then they'll do it if they really believe in the work.
Yeah.
And those guys have done they did Sputnik, and they did Warmth of the Cold, and Warmth of the Cold was Yellow Taxi.
Mm-hmm.
But, people have been willing to do that for me because they don't have overhead and they believe in me. And, was maybe 2 years ago now, I did a reading of my two-hander that I wrote, Talking to Starlight, with Kath Palmer and Aaron Campagna. It was around this time of year because I remember the night it opened, it was, we did a reading of it at the Riverwalk Cafe in Nashua. And it was a Sunday night, and it was opening of Game of Thrones. And I thought, no one is going to be there. Right. No one. They're all going to be home watching Game of Thrones. And I actually thought of a joke. I said, welcome to our reading. A lot of you know there's a big game going on, so I thought I'd give you an update. It's Thrones 1, Peasants nothing. But Ray, just like in Keene, I walked into there. There must have been 100 people there to see this reading. It blew me away. I was so moved that I was getting that much support in my, adopted hometown. Ernest Thompson came down to see it. Michael didn't like that very much because Ernest sort of blew his own horn a couple of times in the talkback that preceded or followed up. And but
there's no way to know what's going to do good. That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
I mean, even Leslie had said to me that the plays they choose up there, they just scratch their head.
It's a crapshoot.
Yes.
Even for
You can have two big name plays.
Yeah.
One will do terrible.
You could do Mamma Mia and you could do Annie. And no one comes to see Annie.
Yeah.
Everyone goes to see Mamma Mia.
They had
or the opposite.
Yeah, right.
No idea. It's a total crapshoot.
That's terrible. I mean, I get terrible. It, but it's good.
Yeah. I totally get it.
To have to try to come up with a season, you just got to throw mud on the wall and see what sticks. Yeah.
And be a little bit psychic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no way
but you can't even, you couldn't do the Pulitzer Prize-winning play from last year because nobody knows what it is.
Right, I don't know.
Right. I can't even remember the title of it, and I knew. I know it's Annie Baker, but how many people have never heard of Annie Baker?
Yeah.
Yeah. Nobody's heard of Annie Baker. Nobody's heard of Susan Laurie Parks, who I think who is one this year or last year, the most recent one.
Yeah. I wonder if maybe then what's really missing in New Hampshire is maybe some kind of an organization that's willing a philanthropist or something like that that's willing to put up the money for these gambles, for the shows nobody's ever heard of, that are well written or fairly well written, that they can afford to take the loss. They can afford to have 25 people show up. You know? Just some kind of an organization that says we're willing to, and there's no gamble really on the part of a small group or a young group.
Well, you know what the writer wants is the biggest theater they can find. I know. To produce their work, because it's your one. It's the thing that gets you to be able to do other things, right? That are inaccessible to you now. There are favorites at the Goodman in Chicago who they produce all the time because they know them, right? So how do you get known? Yeah. Right? How do you break in? And
they have to be showcased somewhere.
So what you're suggesting is that, there's a level of philanthropy where if we had a theater in New Hampshire, a stage in New Hampshire like the Woolly Mammoth in D.C., have you ever heard of that company? No. Woolly Mammoth is sort of famous among writers because they will produce original works pretty regularly, and they're probably part of this New Play Network. There are maybe 25 or 30 theaters in this thing called the New Play Network that will all agree on one or two shows that they're going to stick in their season, regardless of how they perform or whether they make any money or not, that will, sort of have an opportunity to discover the next great thing, right? So that's what you're saying is, I did my Talking to Starlight at the Hatbox. Hardly anyone saw it because it was in July. And people are traveling on vacation. Even people that would normally come and see something I wrote couldn't make it because they were out of town for, whatever reason. But I got to do it at least. And I had two very good friends of mine, Jen Sasek and Joe, do that show with me. And we got to know each other. And, it's the same sort of collaborative thing that you and I did. And I think it made the play better. Michael Curtis came and saw it and hated the ending, but good that he hated the ending because it generated discussion and made everyone think about it. Made me think about whether I want to rebrand it, and that's the gift of theater as opposed to film. Once it's filmed and it's in the can and it's out, there ain't no rewriting happening. Right? Ernest Thompson has rewritten On Golden Pond 4 or 5 times.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. There's different published versions of the script that are floating around out there that he's rewritten. You can't do that anymore. And he's at Winnipesaukee this year.
Yeah, doing his On Golden Pond.
Yeah. And unfortunately, he's...
he didn't call me.
He hasn't called you?
No, he has not. No, he has not. No.
You want me to put in a word for you?
I should check. Maybe he called today. I'll have to check my phone when we're done.
I'll put in a word for you.
Yeah, thanks, Forrest.
Bring coffee. Maybe he'll... I think that a lot of theaters, here's a really good example. If On Golden Pond wasn't what it is or isn't what it is, one of the characters, the boyfriend, how many scenes is he in? 1 scene. He's in 1 scene. A lot of theaters, if no one had ever heard of this play, if it was just coming out now, they would go, do you need that guy? We have to pay an extra actor, to be in this scene. Let's pick a different play. Because this one's expensive. So I got to pay this guy to be in 1 scene.
Oh, man.
You pay him the same amount. You're paying him whether he's in 1 or 5 scenes, right? And he's got to show up every night, right? So if you've got 2 plays that are equally good, and one's got a guy that's only in 1 scene, and maybe... you could rewrite it and get rid of him, or you could do the other one with the guy's not there. People do the other one, all the things being the same. If you're Neil Pankhurst and you're trying to decide, you're talking with your wife, which one of these 2 should we do, right? Yeah. We'll do the one that's cheaper. Yeah. That's less actors.
Or if you could at least maybe have other plays you could put him in, right? So you hangs around for the season.
If you've got a company like that, but if you're looking at it from a show-by-show point of view, you might not choose On Golden Pond because you're got an extra guy.
Yeah.
You kind of go, really, one scene? Come on. That's why you see all these two-handers out there. There are millions of them. And but on the pun being what it is, and people ignore that because it's iconic. It's probably one of the 10 most produced plays in the United States. Joel, end of his season, he's going to do Almost Maine.
What? Oh, he is?
Almost Maine up at
is that right? I didn't see that.
Yeah, I think that's what he told me. I hope I'm not.
Aren't they doing the Fantastics?
Maybe you'll have to bleep this if they haven't announced their season yet. But they're ending their year with Almost Maine.
Ending their year.
Yeah, with Almost Maine.
Two characters playing 90, two guys playing 90
you
characters.
You can do it that way. You can do it that way. You can also do it with different actors in every scene, right? So one of the beauties of that particular two-hander is that it's very, very flexible. I read an article in American Theater, I think
am I thinking Greater Tuna?
No,
okay.
Almost Maine is like that. I read this article, and I think it was in American Theater, that it was Almost Maine is very popular with high school kids or high school productions because you can put 2 kids in each of the 6 scenes of that show, and you can have, and they only are responsible for their 20 minutes or whatever, and then they're gone. So it's a quick rehearsal process for them. They have the one scene. It's all about them for 20 minutes, and then they're gone. So you can get more kids involved instead of just 2 actors playing all the parts. You can have 18 kids in 9 different parts.
You see the draw there. Scenes.
So it's very popular in high schools for that reason, and it's also one of the most produced plays in the United States because for that reason. It's very so popular.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
Striking gold.
I wish I had an idea that was as good as that. And John, I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, Caracini, something like that, who wrote Almost Maine. He's a cousin or somebody that's here in Concord.
Oh, he is?
Yeah. And he's been up here to see Almost Maine done by Concord, I guess, in the recent past. But it's been both a blessing and a curse to him because he's really an actor or wants to be an actor, but he's by far best known for this play that he wrote. And it's funny and it's clever, but it isn't particularly deep or anything. It's simple. And, it's unoffensive, too. That's the other reason why high schools like it, is there's no F-bombs in it. And it's...
I've seen some high school. Didn't Bow High School a year or two ago do Glenn Ross?
Oh, yeah, that was Bo. I remember hearing.
I think it was Bo.
Yeah.
Ooh, talk about F-bomb.
Right.
I don't know how they got that one by.
The other way to go.
Yeah.
Right? As opposed to Almost Maine.
Yeah.
Almost Maine is like completely unoffensive, and Glenn Ross is completely offensive.
Yes. I forget how that turned out, but I know initially there was some concern. Rightly so, I think, for high school level anyway.
That's an interesting, also another writer's thing. There's a bunch of writers out there who, both in the past and the future, who write stuff aimed at high schools. From a business point of view, it makes a little bit of sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they're probably the biggest consumers out there. And if you just aim at that market and you don't worry about the Goodman theaters of the world, your chances are much, much higher of penetrating the market, so to speak.
And a little more lucrative.
And, you might, get produced all over the place. And there are certain guys, none of which names pop into my head at the moment, but there's been guys in the past who have... they're making a killing and will continue to make a killing selling plays to high schools and doing, what I would consider just like, holy smoke, really?
Yeah.
This is so, to do Glenn Ross, a very challenging, deeply upsetting play, but has a lot of truth to it in a high school is kind of remarkable.
Yeah.
It says something about their theater department, and
I'll
their
tell you.
artistic director sort of go into bat for a play like that, and for the school board and whatever to say
The
no,
kids must have loved it because they get to swear every third word's a swear.
Yeah.
That curse.
So I wrote a children's play called Midsummer Days Daydream. And in A Midsummer Days Daydream, it's maybe a 1 hour play aimed at teens. And I sent it in to this contest in Manhattan at this theater called Kaboo or something like that. It's just for kids in Manhattan, and I win. It's one of the only contests I've ever won. And so they do a production of my play, and I come down to see it in Manhattan. And so this one sort of moment in the play is when the whole idea of the play is this boy and a girl meet at a party, and they touch each other's hands, and at the moment when they touch each other, their reaction to touching each other is manifest by their egos appearing. One part of the ego is very macho, one is very feminine, and the other's kind of in the middle. And each one of them has the same 3 characters. Of course, they behave very differently, whether it's the girl or the boy. So those 6 characters are deciding whether these two, the boy and the girl, are going to get together or not, right? And so the feminine part of the boy, the sort of gay part, and the macho part of the girl have this wedding. They have a wedding. And what's the line? It's something about, the boy talks about how much he loves clothes and dresses and the whole pageantry of the wedding scene and stuff like that. And the kids in the audience are going completely apeshit.
No
kidding. It was hysterical that, a boy would behave this way.
Yeah.
And he says something about being gay or sort of alluding to being gay. And they just lost it. It was so much fun for me.
Wow.
To see, the comedy that I wrote being so well received.
Yeah.
And they just loved it. And so after the whole thing's over, the artistic director or whatever comes out and thanks everybody for being there and says, we have the playwright in the audience. And so they all give me a round of applause very politely. But this guy, Jared, and his wife, who are sitting next to me, turned to me and say, I can't thank you enough for submitting this and having written this play because, our kids always play, third petunia from the right. And this really has some meaning in it, even if it's not, it's about, relationships. And, these are teenagers. This is what they're going through every day,
Yeah.
It's all about girls if you're a boy and boys if you're a girl or whatever. And you're addressing something that's a very real thing for them. And it never occurred to me, that was a good idea to not write third petunia from the right? But they loved it. So I appreciated it even more for that reason. And what was the name of that company? They were going to put it in their catalog of children's plays. Yeah. And then for some reason they stopped publishing that catalog that year, and so I never got in.
Did you resubmit it anywhere else?
No, I haven't sent it anywhere else since.
You're that close again.
I know. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. God, man. All right, we're getting long in the tooth. What did you have anything else you want to talk about that's coming up, or?
I'm mostly working on the tour. Do you want to talk about the tour?
Sure, absolutely. You talking about the Christmas tour?
Christmas Carol tour.
How'd that go last year? You had a couple of new venues. Are you went to a larger venue or something?
Well, so we have an agent, a company called CMI that's out of Florida mostly, but they're kind of New York City. And every year they do, I don't think most people know this industry at all, but people like Katie Collins and Matt Cahoon and people like that know that if Matt wants to bring a show to Pinkerton, or if they're going to bring a show to the Capitol Center, where do they find these? How do they pick them, right? They go to these conferences where, in New York City, for example, the one that I go to, where they sell our show, Christmas Carol, it's at the New York Hilton, and it's 2 or 3 floors of several, 100 square feet of booths of shows that are available for you to buy for your venue in XYZ, whatever, America. And did you have any idea that
No.
Nobody has any idea.
It's like an underground world of...
Nobody has any idea that this exists, right? And
so different theaters from around the country
theaters, yeah. Somebody, like Matt goes every year.
Yeah.
I'm sure somebody from Capitol Center, I don't know if it's Katie or who goes.
And a show has a booth. Is that what happens?
And so you
showcase their...
You have a production of Les Miserables, or you have a production of whatever.
A touring production?
Yes, I mean, by default, it's touring, right? Because you're looking for a venue. And so you have, this show, and you're basically pitching it to whoever wanders by, and they'll can read your pamphlets, and maybe it's Les Miserables and they've heard of it. Maybe it's Magician. There are tons of magicians, and you can sign up. It's a 3-day conference. Each night of the conference, they have productions of whatever going on in the. We have productions going on of these different shows running as examples of what they do. Maybe it's the first 20 minutes of Les Miserables, or maybe it's something else. Maybe it's a magician, maybe it's a singer, who knows? And there's hundreds of these productions being sold at this place. It's super expensive to be there.
Really?
As a promoter or as a producer. It's a couple of grand. It's expensive to be there. But the first time I heard about this, I said, Andrew Pennard and I went down together, and my agent got us passes to go in for the day. We had no idea that anything like that existed before that. I didn't anyway.
I can't even get my head around what's happening.
You'll have to come with me next year.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Should have done that with True. Put it out there.
Well, so now, if you're going to produce a play that somebody else owns the rights to, then you would have to get permission to tour that show, right? Mm. But so we sell Christmas Carol at that conference and many other conferences that our agent goes to, and they, know this business. That a lot of their clients they've worked with for 20 years or longer, and everybody knows everybody. They all go to the same conferences. It's the same people going every year. And I'm sure there's some that don't go and some go for the first time or whatever, but there's a core of them that go all the time from all over the country. And this is one of the biggest shows in the country, biggest conferences. And this is where you go to book,
And they set up their seasons based off of these.
David Blaine went to the Capitol Center. How the heck did they get David Blaine? They went to a conference, I'm guessing. Maybe not in that particular instance, but they go to a conference and they say, the Willoughbys are here, and let's book them. And so you go and find out what it costs to book them, and you weigh that against what you think you can make on it and book them. And sometimes it's probably just as much of a crapshoot as the Winnie P does in producing their own work.
Yeah, well, it must be hard then logistically for a group to figure out 10 theaters want us. You have to figure out dates that work.
Sure, dates that they want you and dates that you can be there. And
And then how are you going to get there on time? How much travel time it's going to take?
The first year I was there, Don Cheadle, the actor, was putting together a show about Black Lives Matter. I don't know if that was the title or not, but it was a great big booth. And it was really expensive. And they were only going to do 2 productions of it, 2 or 3. And so if you wanted it, you had to pony up the money. I think it was I want to say $30,000 or $40,000. It was really expensive because it had a lot of people in it. And I was talking to the guys running the booth, and they did a production of it in New York City so people could come and see it and see what they were going to buy.
Wow.
So, Don Cheadle put up the money to produce it in New York and put it in a venue that it was appropriate to, and then, like I said, it was expensive to go into this. And have you ever heard of this?
No.
I never. You never would have heard of it unless it came to your town.
Yeah.
But it was a big deal. And, so there's stuff like that. And then there's a guy with, a Volkswagen and a box of magic tricks. And he'll come and do his show for $1,500, right? I mean, there's that end of the scale and the other end of the scale. It's kind of amazing what's there.
Wow.
And so we are the largest, at least probably the second largest after a company called the Nebraska Theater Caravan. But we're one of the largest touring productions of A Christmas Carol in the United States.
Largest meaning cast? Largest meaning...
in terms of number of venues that we do.
Oh.
Yeah, we do between 23 and 25 shows a year. But it depends on who books us. Often we do the same venue year after year. We've been in Galveston, Texas, ever since I've been involved with it. And before that, when Scott ran it from Gene's Playhouse, he was all in Galveston. So they've been there 4 or 5 years in a row with the same show. And they love it. At Galveston last year, at intermission, they stood up and applauded.
No
kidding. A standing ovation for A Christmas Carol. And I sit there and go, wow, these people, they never get out. They don't get out much. They would never go see Gary Glenn Ross. They're doing what? Gary who?
Yeah.
Nah, I don't want to see that. Christmas Carol, let's go. Bring Grandma. Get Grandma, get everybody. All 15 of us will go. That's the show we're going to see this year.
And how big of a venue is that?
We'll go to Galveston. We'll stay for the day. We'll have a great time. A great big venue. The 18-something Opera House in Galveston's been there since God was a boy. And a beautiful, beautiful venue. Professional staff, the whole 9 yards. It's a tremendous place.
Have you thought about mounting another production and doing it so you've got two different, not necessarily two Christmas carols, but
I've said to Scott, I said, someday people are going to go, you know what? I've seen this before. What else you got? And I said, let's have another show that's smaller. This thing costs us over $100,000 to produce and take on the road. Right? Because we got to pay actors, and we got to buy equipment, and we got to rent transportation.
To house them.
Yada, yada, yada. Yeah. And it's well over $100,000 a year to run this thing. And so part of the reason for that is because the cast is so big, right? More people take more resources. So if we had a cast of 5 in a much smaller, where all the actors play multiple roles, like we saw with Amelia the other night, it would be more challenging for the actors and more in different kind of show, obviously. And you could make it darker or funnier or whatever, but it would be not the same as what we do now, which has got 15 or 16 actors in it, maybe not that many. And a fairly, 3 or 4 technical people, a stage manager and a TD and a sound guy, at a minimum. And if I go with my bud dragging along, I sort of manage the company and be a production manager and a finance guy. And but it's a big.
So you're thinking about it, but you haven't come up with anything?
Well, so we've pitched this to our agent to sell at one of these conferences, and they're sort of mediocre on the whole thing.
Well, you've already got a good name. What are they?
Yeah, I'm not sure. We haven't. We're going to run out of time.
No, they're going to be in here at noon. So
I see. We may someday do it. It just depends on whatever, but it's a big deal. It's a huge.
Bigger than
It takes a lot of time for us to. We're working on it now. Not every day, of course, but just lining up actors for the fall and for the winter, and getting technical people, it's sometimes a real problem.
I don't know if you want to get into this, but compensation for your actors pretty comparable to what? I mean,
well, we
they're not union, so
no, they're not union. If it was, we couldn't afford it. If it was union,
yeah.
These places, they don't. We have some gigs that we get paid pretty well at big theaters. Like last year, we did the Schubert in Connecticut, and we also do small theaters in the middle of nowhere in Kentucky, and we get a third of what they pay us in Connecticut, right? So, over the course of the whole thing, we're not making a killing on this by any means,
I can imagine,
right? But we make enough that it's worth doing it again the next year. And, Scott loves to perform. He'd probably do it for nothing, like he says in Field of Dreams. I would have done it I would have done it for beer money or something, right? I mean, people just do it for the love of theater, right? Yeah. So, but we do okay. We get to pay our technical people. We pay a lot more to get them because actors will do it for less. It's just the way it is. But also we have such a big cast, so we just couldn't afford to pay them. Our payroll is probably 2/3 of our budget. Maybe a little bit less than that, but it's a big chunk of it. And that's, all the housing and meals and everything else. Imagine. It's well over $100,000.
Logistics have been brutal. Yeah. Brutal.
Yeah. But it's, I like doing it, and as theater goes, just as a title, it's killer. People will go see A Christmas Carol that would, if you were to somehow do a poll, I'll bet you a nickel, depending on the part of the country you're in, but if they're going to see one play, that's the one they're going to go see, right? If you can poll regular, normal, everyday Americans, if you're going to go to the theater, which of these X titles would you see? That's the one a whole bunch of people will pick. Because they sold out. In Albuquerque, New Mexico, 2 years ago, 2,000 people in one venue. The guy told me they made $80,000 bringing us in. One day.
Wow.
I said, we didn't charge you enough. And he said, I'm turning them away at the door. I have people at the door trying to get in.
What?
To see this show. They don't know who we are. There's no star in the cast. It's not, it's not Kevin Costner. It's nobody they've ever heard of. And there's 2,000 people come to see it.
Man.
Yeah. In Galveston, Texas, we do 2 or 3 shows. I forget. We do like a Saturday, Sunday matinee. Yeah, so 2 shows. Or Friday, Saturday, Sunday matinee. 3. Depends. Anyway.
Yeah.
They sell out every one of them. People drive from Houston. It'd be like going to the Cape for the weekend.
Wow.
Right? It's this beautiful shore with palm trees and everything in the Gulf of Mexico. And people from Houston will go to Galveston to spend the weekend, and they'll go see a show, and they sell out. And
head scratcher.
We do places like Artesia, New Mexico, in the middle of all these refineries and giant tanks of natural gas or whatever. Is this little tiny theater sold out? She couldn't wait to book us again. People had a great time.
That's incredible.
And
I'm so glad to hear that.
It's kind of strange why people like this show so much. They love Christmas Carol. It's a very redemptive story. People love redemption. People love stories about redemption. We can have a whole nother talk about structure and about redemption as a story. But if you think about the most popular movies, whatever, Star Wars. What happens at the end of Star Wars? What does Han Solo do? He shows up unexpected and helps Luke win the day. He redeems himself. Everybody, he said, I'm going to take my money and get out of here. And then he goes, you're all clear, kid. And he's redeemed, and everyone loves him. If he had just left because of his money, he would have been a scumbag, right? But he's redeemed. People love that. People love the redemption story. So Ebenezer comes out the next day, celebrating Christmas, gives all his money away.
Buys the big turkey.
Christmas
goose.
He's redeemed.
Yeah.
And people love the redemption story. It's genius.
Mm.
And there you have it. Another great one in the tank. That one's going off to the memorial. Have a great day.